Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, listeners of all ages, you are listening to ATACS, episode 10. We are adults, we're talking about cool stuff, and this is episode 10, 1-0. We are in the double digits. I am Paul, your host from Atlanta, Georgia, and I just want to say, Mr. Flex from Raleigh, North Carolina, I'm so glad that this is the 10th time that we have been able to sit down and just talk about video games.
It's kind of crazy. I only have 10 fingers as well, so I can't count any higher than this, which means this might have to be our last episode.
I'm going to say no to that, but also ask Mr. Will from Greenville, North Carolina. Mr. Will, do you have 10 toes to help us out here?
I have 11. I've played a little too much Fallout, and I just created a new one.
And with that means our valued listeners will at least get to episode number 21. Mr. Ryan from the hometown of Mario in Brooklyn, New York, how do you feel about all this? You have a lot of opinions.
I think our collective mind will be able to work out this advanced math.
You know, I would have said yes to that, but at this point, I'm not 100% certain. But thankfully, to save us from these two-digit numbers, we have Mr. Nate from Wendell, North Carolina. How's it going, Nate?
All right, I have nothing with which to save you all.
And with that, our valued listeners will know that we have exactly 11 more episodes, and that will be the end of the series.
The doomsday is coming.
Doomsday is coming.
I have a math degree, and I have no idea how to solve this problem.
22 weeks. That's all you got, guys. Good luck. I hope you've gotten all your bug-out bags ready and all your shelters stocked, because after that, ATACS is ending. I'm just kidding. It'll continue forever. We're going to move... Yeah, right, exactly. We're going to move right into our talk about video games. Instead of throwing it around to our virtual table, I'm kind of going to just open it up to the floor with what is a bit of news, but also a bit of video games. That Mass Effect Andromeda has been getting some pretty bad reception. I've heard a lot of things from a lot of folks, also a lot of outlets, that not only are there some technical issues with the game, there's also animation issues, there's story problems, there's combat problems, there's a lot of problems. This very well may be our first AAA release of the year to just get some relatively middling reviews, which, you know, to be fair, it's a pretty good year if this is the very first one to get some middling reviews. But I think it's worth noting that this hasn't really been looking great in a lot of different places. Flex, I'll throw it to you first. Do you have any thoughts about this, or any things that you've read that are noteworthy that kind of pings you?
Well, in a weird way, it kind of helps me because I'm already way backlogged on games, and now I don't have to play Mass Effect because it doesn't look great.
It's true.
Yeah, I'm in the same. I'm in the same place.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, like, it's like Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3. Like, that was one of my favorite franchises from the previous generation of consoles. I really like those games, and it's a bummer to see a subpar Mass Effect game. At the same time, it's also, like, this is a different BioWare now. Like,
yes,
this is not, like, I'm sure there are some people still there that worked on those 3 games, but I feel like a lot has changed in the past 5+ years since Mass Effect 3 came out. And you can even see some of it with, like, Dragon Age Inquisition. And when that game came out, like, they explicitly said that was going to be the template for their games going forward. And so that already made me a little skeptical about Andromeda, because a lot of people liked Inquisition. I personally didn't care for some of its design changes. So, like, I was a little skeptical about Andromeda anyway, but it sounds like even regardless of that, like, there's just kind of some technical execution issues that even Inquisition didn't have, like frame rate stuff and animation stuff and all that. It sounds like it's just kind of a sloppy game. So it's more than anything, it's just a bummer to see a game in a universe I really like from a franchise I've really dearly liked before. Like, I think Mass Effect 2 is one of my favorite games I've ever played, hands down. Like, that series has done incredible stuff before, so it's a bummer that the new one is not to be fair, I have not played it, but by all appearances, it does not seem to be that stellar.
Yeah, and I don't really feel like that any of us have put any time into it. This is just more one of those. I wanted to bring it into this section just to, this is one of the first AAA titles of this year that's really gotten some universally questionable reception. But
well, I don't know about that. I mean, there have been a lot of. I mean, I remember, Wildlands. I mean, is one that didn't really review all that well. I mean, there's been a couple.
Yeah, I
Wildlands
actually
has
just pulled
sold
up
incredibly
to
well.
see if there was anything else, and I pulled up a list of games ranked by reviews, and ironically, Mass Effect Andromeda and Ghost Recon Wildlands are literally right next to each other. They're almost equal. But
Yeah.
I get what you're saying, Paul.
Yeah, I think in contrast, I think there's a higher percentage of higher quality releases this year than it seems like. I mean, there's been like a slew of like 10s, 9s, 9.5s, So I think I see what you're saying.
And also
there was an article.
Mass Effect has higher cachet than Ghost Recon, perhaps.
There's a difference in expectations, I think.
Yeah.
A Mass Effect, Ghost Recon.
But I think there was an article over at Waypoint that was exploring. I went and checked that out, I think, after Flex told me to. There was an article there exploring the idea that, just the fact that people are going to be harsher on this because the nature of the game initially, the nature of, the way you cultivated the relationships with your crewmates, that sort of stuff, it lent itself to a certain type of emotional attachment. I mean, so much so that, they immediately tried to like renege the ending or whatever, if you guys remember at 3. I mean, just because people are so passionate about this series. So
right.
I think any deviation from expectation, I mean, in some ways, I mean, we always want to say that, a new game, a new Mass Effect game, can't, or anything that's new can't necessarily sully the reputation or the experience that we had with the previous game. But in some ways now this is sort of a, just like Flex used to have to say, or probably still has to say, I'm a gigantic fan of Metroid except for Other M. Now, like, Mass Effect people might have to say, well, I love these Mass Effect games, well, except for that Andromeda. It's sort of like a new caveat or a new sort of thing that you kind of have to contend with your beloved series. A dull spot, so to speak.
Right. Nate, you played a decent amount of the previous trilogy, right?
Yes, I have. I love the original trilogy Mass Effect games. I've played them
loved all of them
each
except for the
multiple
first
times. Except for the first one?
Yeah.
Okay.
William, I'm gonna
You
get
mean
to
the
you
second best Mass Effect game, Will?
I guess I do. Driving around in the Mako or whatever it was.
Absolutely. The Mako was the best part of the game, but Nate, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say I've played them all multiple times from different angles, done everything in all of those games, absolutely love them. If you had told me before this year that the new Mass Effect game would come out and I am contemplating not even playing it, then I would have told you were crazy. So I think I probably will play it at some point, but definitely not anytime soon, and probably once it's a little cheaper.
Yeah, so I mean, just to to be on the record, I am definitely one of those folks that everyone has their certain type of game or their certain genre or setting that just sort of clicks with them. For me, I am definitely an RPG fan. And boy, do I love space. So when Mass Effect came out, that was right down my alley. And, for the years when Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3, and 3 is questionable, but when those games came out, I was incredibly excited. And, even with all that working for Andromeda, just based off of what I've seen, I'm not quite there.
Yeah.
Given both what my backlog is, but also what has just come out in this calendar year to March 26th, 2017.
Yeah, this year's been crazy.
Yeah, so...
But even with Mass Effect Andromeda, like, the reception it's gotten since release has changed my mind a lot. Like, it wasn't something that I was I mean, I was tentative on it, I guess, before release, just because it was a new start for the series. But I thought that even within the framework of Mass Effect, that they had found a good way to come back to it after the trilogy had wrapped up really well. Like the whole conceit of going to a different galaxy and seeing what was there, and being part of this mission of people going to explore and find new worlds. I thought that was a cool idea. So I don't even know that. Yeah, it's been a roller coaster, waiting for this game and then seeing some of the initial reaction and then having it release and reading all the reception to it. Yeah, seems like a bummer. I'm bummed even without having played it yet, but I'll have to reserve my personal judgment until I do get around to playing it.
Yeah. So before we move on to games that we actually have played, Ryan, Will, do you have anything else that you kind of want to touch on with Andromeda, or just kind of move on?
Yeah, I mean, I watched a little bit of gameplay, read some reviews of it. I certainly think it's interesting just to witness, because like I said, it is a series that's so near and dear. But yeah, I think we've explored it.
No comment.
All right. So just a quick question, Ryan. Did you play any of the Mass Effect 1 through 3, or did you skip out on the series?
I played the first game.
Okay.
That's been it for my Mass Effect experience.
Okay, I was just curious. I didn't know what your personal history was with that particular series. So okay, all right. So Mr. Flex, you've been playing that Zelda along with everyone else apparently. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
I could talk about that a little bit. I could talk about it a lot. There's a whole lot going on with that Zelda.
I think we can talk about Zelda as little or as much as people are willing to listen to us talk about
it 3 minutes or 3
hours.
Or
let's avoid spoilers.
In that game.
So avoiding spoilers, you have 6.5 minutes. Go.
I think that's a funny thing.
Well, there's this guy named Ganon,
because spoiling that game.
Spoiling that game's kind of difficult.
That's 99% of what I played the past 2 weeks. That game continues to be fantastic, and it's interesting because I'm not a big open world guy, and I'm really just taking it as I feel like playing it, which turns out to be that's all I want to play, because it continues to be it continues to just suck me in. Every time I sit down to play it, I run into new interesting stuff to see, and it's I don't know how they did it. Yeah. They have somehow made a giant open world that doesn't rely on the side quests being just the same repeated things over and over, and they don't rely on randomly generated dungeons and randomly generated loot. And it's they found some way to make a world that's huge and dynamic, but also it also has the polish of a structured Mario game or something. It has if you think about most Nintendo games, they're actually pretty small in scope, relatively speaking. And I feel that's allowed them to keep a lot of polish in their games, because their games usually are very polished. And it feels like they've somehow made this just ridiculously enormous open world that's also polished. I can't think of any bugs I've encountered or anything like that. There's no, you think of the Bethesda stuff that's
sure,
it's too big and it's too unwieldy, so of course it's going to have technical problems, but I haven't encountered much in this game.
Do you know how they did it? They did it because their development cycle was longer than the lifespan of their console.
That's probably a good part of it.
I mean, yes, it is an amazing game, but I think it's also kind of worth putting out there that this is a game that they spent an inordinate amount of time in a very Nintendo-like fashion, as they say. They did spend probably 5 times as much time on this game as you would see in a regular AAA development time span. So yes, it's amazing, but they also did put a ton of effort into it.
Yeah, but I mean, it worked. It works.
They got a system seller out of it.
Yes, they did. Yes, you're totally right, Ryan.
Yeah, I don't think that diminishes it in any way, but it is an interesting point to note that Nintendo is the company willing to put their big probably one of their biggest development teams up for one game for 5+ years and really just hammer away on it until it comes out like this. Not many companies have the resources or willingness to do that.
Its development cycle is half as long as Final Fantasy 15, and it's at least half as buggy too.
Well, you're right. But
it's also a huge risk. Like,
yeah.
Think about that game in the context of all the open world games that have come out in the past decade, and also in the context of Zelda's history, and how big of a sidestep it is from both of those conventions, how big of a risk they took with this game. Like, they could have spent that many years and that much development effort on it, making sure everything was that polished, and it just come out and not resonate with people at all. Like, the risk they took with this game is kind of mind-blowing in a way. Like, it's really crazy what they did with this thing.
And you consider where Nintendo is right now as a company, like they kind of needed a win, and they got it.
They like seemingly dug it up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Because like the last console Zelda game was Skyward Sword.
Yeah.
Like this game could not be the more anti-Skyward Sword possible.
Right.
Like they have done a complete 180 of what this franchise, of the trend this franchise has been going in for the past decade.
Well, you're talking about in terms of like hand holding and things like that specifically.
Yeah, I mean, really, almost every part of its design. Like, I mean, it's still a Zelda game. It still has Z targeting for combat. Like, there's certainly some things that are still Zelda-like, but I would say 80-90% of this game, like in its design, has broken out of that mold that has defined really all the 3D Zelda games before this one.
Yeah, and I think it's also kind of worth noting that that this particular game, Breath of the Wild, I mean, it really does feel like that the developers of this game / storytellers, whatever, they went back to the very first Zelda game, right? And they went, okay, this game was a success. And this game was a success because we had an old man in a cave who gave the player a sword, and they just went around and found stuff. And that's really what this game feels like versus the sort of linear and hand-holdy kind of pieces that you would see from the more recent Zelda games, which really started in A Link to the Past in the SNES version, because that's the game that started with a linear opening sequence that it did eventually open up, but it also started with you got to go to the castle, it's raining, and here's your first sword, and good luck. But there was still a linearity about it that doesn't really exist, in that very, very first Zelda game.
Yeah, and I think like one of possibly my favorite thing about Breath of the Wild is you get that quest to kill Ganon right at the start. Like, you have your final quest right at the start, and that's, you have that the whole game. Like, it's just there. You can go do that anytime, which makes the side quest, like, you think about most open world games, and they have a main quest, but it's very much, okay, do this mission. Now go do this mission. Now go do this mission. And like, most open world games are actually fairly linear. It's just like the open world is just like a goofy playground you can go mess around in. And Zelda, I think, kind of sidesteps that by just giving you your final mission right at the start, and everything else you do is technically a side quest.
Right.
And all of those quests, they're not just like to go get experience or like, to just go have fun, goof around in the open world. Like, all of the side stuff you do feels like preparing for your one mission that you have from the start. It's like you have the mission to kill Ganon from the start. If you want to just do the through line, you can just go do that, but it's going to be really freaking hard. So the game presents you with all this other stuff, and it's like, I'm not doing this to just go check off some boxes. I'm doing this because Ganon is one tough mofo, and I need to prepare for this. So it really does an amazing job of making it feel like you're going on some expedition or adventure to like go prepare yourself. Like, you are preparing for this fight that is being built up as this just monumental task. And I think that's a really amazing way to use an open world that I don't think most open world games really do. Like, most open world games, you can just go through the main quest and just go through that. And it's like, okay, I really didn't engage with this open world at all. Like, that's just all optional goof around stuff.
Right.
This open world really ties into that kind of adventure in a way of like, I need to prepare for this. I need to go figure things out.
Right. And Nate, I'm going to throw it over to you because I see that Zelda is the game that you have down that you really want to talk about. So I'm going to throw it over to you for a second, and I'm going to go blow my nose because it is spring and pollen is terrible right now. So you talk for at least the next 2 minutes. I'll be right back.
I got you. But yeah, you know how I prepare to fight the Calamity Ganon?
Uh-huh.
By collecting someone's lost chickens in a village.
Uh-huh. All right.
But no, I 100% get behind your point that most of the stuff you're doing in that game is Link's quest to prepare to face Ganon and save Hyrule, and I think it does do that really effectively with its sort of goofy side quests sprinkled along the way.
Yeah. Some of that goofy stuff, like, collecting chickens is probably a really good example of one that just does not matter at all. But but there are also a lot of the side quests that's like, you kind of see how the citizens of that world are dealing with the situation they've been in for 100 years.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is just like helping them for helping them's sake.
Yeah.
And you're never really promised a great reward from it. And I think that's a nice way to just make the world feel like a place rather than being like, kind of your normal transactional stuff with NPCs.
Yeah, and I think that is a really strong point about this game. And I'm trying to not talk about anything that could be considered spoilery, which is really hard with this game because I kind of feel like every little piece of it is a spoiler in some way. Because
real quick aside on that is I sent Nate a picture of something a few weeks ago, and I said, Nate, what in the world am I seeing? Is this a spoiler? Should I not mention this? And Nate's like, yeah, that's a crazy thing. That's probably a spoiler. I don't know. It's just a thing you see in the world, and it's like there's so many weird little details that are just crazy.
And I think part of my response to that was I think everything about this game is a spoiler. Because it really is. Like, it's just seeing not only locations and enemy types and other random things in the world that are unique or not, and seeing the way the mechanics work and how different things interact and all of that is part of the experience, which is actually something I've been thinking about while I've been playing it, because this is the only game I have literally played for the last 3 weeks since it came out. I think it's been 3 weeks, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So this is literally the only game I've been playing, and as I've been playing it this past week, what I've been thinking is like, this is an amazing game. I love everything about it, just about. Like, I have a couple of nitpicks, but overall, just an incredible experience. And then I'm thinking about it in the terms of other Zelda games and other like favorite games of mine. And one thing that I thought of that I thought was interesting was like, I don't know if I'll ever replay this game.
Yeah, I'm definitely there with you. I mean, as another guy who for the last 3 weeks is basically. I mean, it hasn't been for me all Zelda all the time, but I definitely finished a game recently. Like, I haven't started anything else, and I'm not sure after I get done whether or not I will ever come back to it.
And like, I don't mean that as a slight against the game because I think it's a super high quality thing, but part of the experience of Breath of the Wild is the discovery and figuring out how all the systems work and figuring out where all the locations are and opening up the map and finding all the little things hidden everywhere. And it's like, if I came back to it again and just cleared the map and said, okay, I'm going to play through this again, I just don't know if that same magic would be there. And I don't think that's a negative against the game. It's just interesting. Because like games like Ocarina of Time, I can replay over and over, and I have probably played that game 20 times, and I love it, but it's different.
Yeah, that's something I actually was thinking about as well, and I'm kind of formulating some thoughts about an article I might write. But it's like, there's something about this game that puts like just the sensation of discovery and adventure and stuff at the forefront of it, that like your quest is yours, and it's not there presenting you. It's not. So many video games, especially over the past decade or two, have been very much like, we're just going to show you this thing and take you on a ride.
Yeah.
And that is not this game at all. This game is,
Not even a
we
little
want
bit.
you to go have your journey. And I think it'd be really hard to create the like magic and wonder of that journey a second time. Like, I think this game does an amazing job at creating that magic and wonder, but I feel like when I finish this game, I'm going to have had my journey, and it's going to have been an incredible journey, but I don't think you can recapture that. Like,
Right.
I don't think you could bottle up that magic again.
Yeah.
It's not like rewatching a movie where you're being taken on that ride. Like, I think it's going to be a very individual, personal thing for everyone.
That might be an interesting discussion to have in a few months from now. I haven't played the game yet, but I would be curious, like how it holds up compared to a game like, like Skyrim, which people are probably still modding to this day. Because I guess maybe for all its quirks, there's a lot of control and customizability to that game. So I'm curious in terms of, we're talking about open world games, what advantages and disadvantages that model has.
Yeah, and I mean, I kind of feel like that in terms of Breath of the Wild, it definitely, like, I'm going to echo the statements of Nate and Flex that it feels very deep, but it doesn't necessarily feel like it has the replayability of something like A Link to the Past. I'm just going to pick that one.
Yeah.
Like Breath of the Wild very much feels like a game that a lot of the charm from it, and also a lot of the, really sort of, noteworthy aspects of the gameplay come from the discovery portion. I'm not so certain that it has the replayability, but I also am not certain that matters, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think it matters, but
the other thing I was gonna say is that I thought of as you've both been talking about the replayability. By the time I finish Breath of the Wild once, that amount of time will probably be longer than I would spend playing through any other Zelda game like 5 times in a row.
Yeah.
Right, and that's another thing to really think about too.
Yeah, like,
Yep.
I've already played Breath of the Wild. Like, I bet I've played through A Link to the Past like 4 or 5 times in my life. I've probably already spent more time on Breath of the Wild than I've spent playing Link to the Past in my life.
Yeah.
And I'm probably about halfway through Breath of the Wild. So, like,
It's a big
the amount
game.
of stuff to see and discover in Breath of the Wild is so orders of magnitude more than any other Zelda game that I don't think I'd want to spend the time replaying it either.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
that is true.
All right. Yeah, and I mean, I've like I said, I've been playing a decent amount of Breath of the Wild as well. I don't really have too much to add other than what you guys have, kind of already talked about.
Unless something was said while you were blowing your nose that just blew your mind, that you just totally
there's definitely that possibility, but I was just going to assume that didn't happen. But I mean, no, it's a really good video game. The only annoyance that I have that I really had with it so far has been the same annoyance that has been echoed a dozen different times, which I wasn't really going to talk about too much. Was I have a specific objective, and that objective requires me to climb this wall. Unfortunately, it is raining, and I will never climb this wall while it is raining. And I mean, like, that's something that everyone
rain is the worst.
Yeah, like, everyone else on the internet's talked about that. I don't want to spend too much time with it. I'm just going to say that out of all the things that people have talked about with that game as far as negatives, that is the one that I personally have ran into and have gone, yeah, I'd love to have the Elder Scrolls / Bethesda style wait button. Let me wait 4 hours, and then I will continue on, because I'm not going anywhere, because it took me 10 minutes to get to this particular spot, and I will just put the Switch down to wait for another 10 to continue to climb up this mountain.
Yeah.
Well, but you could find a shelter nearby and make a campfire and wait there.
but I'm literally standing on the one little slice
Yeah, no, I get you.
of geometry that doesn't drain my stamina, and oh god, I don't want to push the stick anymore because I wasn't dead.
Yeah, it
yeah,
can get in the way sometimes. It hasn't been a deal breaker or anything for me in any particular instance, but it can be a mild annoyance.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's just frustrating because I have to just literally stop and just wait for 5 minutes for the rain to stop, which is just annoying.
Yeah.
I wish you could either climb. I like the idea of climbing being tougher during the rain,
Hmm.
but I don't like the idea of climbing being impossible in the rain, which is what it is.
It's virtually impossible. If you only have to climb a little bit, it's possible,
Yeah,
but it's virtually impossible.
when in that game are you just climbing a little bit?
Yeah, I get you.
I wish it either was still possible to climb during rain, or if it would just rain less, because it seems to rain all the time.
Right.
Depends on where you are. Like some areas I've been in and it's never rained.
Yeah, I was playing a few days ago, and it started raining, and I was like, man, I was just about to climb this cliff. Let me just go look over here, and then I'll come back real quick, and hopefully it'll stop raining. And I went to go look over there, it stopped raining, and then I started running back to the cliff, and by the time I got back to the cliff, it started raining again.
Yeah.
And I was like, great. And all of this took place in the span of like 15 minutes. Like, it's not like I waited for half an hour and then it started raining. It was like it.
Oh, I've had times where it shows the little weather meter where it shows you the next like 5 segments of weather, and I don't know how long those segments are at game time, but I had one time where it stopped raining and I had a period of sun, and then it had rain again after that, and I couldn't make it up the cliff in that one blip of sun.
Yeah.
So it's
That's
like,
funny.
Oh yeah, that stuff frustrates the crap out of me.
Yeah.
Um,
So moving a little bit beyond.
Can I just say
Zelda-
one last Zelda thing?
Sure, go ahead.
I just kind of to drive home a lot of the points we've been talking about is like I've probably been playing that game like 40-ish hours, and I still feel like I'm discovering new things. And I think that's really crazy. Like, how many games can you say that for? It's like every time I sit down to play that game, I see something new. And that's just really awesome. So like that game's definitely got its hooks in me.
Well, let me tell you about a little game called Stardew Valley. No, I'm just kidding. So,
Awesome.
so Will, save us from some of this Zelda chat. We've been going on this for a little while now, but you wrote down a lot of games not named Zelda, so I'm gonna throw the floor over to you and let you tell us about some other things.
Well, I'll do what I can. I mean, it's been a sensation. So I've been, reading the positives and watching Mark Brown talk about Zelda. So it's been something. It's been interesting to kind of follow, and then, I watch a lot of the critical opinions of it too, and so it's interesting.
Yeah. And by the way, if the rest of you haven't seen it, Mark Brown on YouTube, he did actually a pair of really cool videos on Breath of the Wild.
Yeah. So I guess recently some of the things I've been messing with, and these I'm not really going to talk very long about, but I started a little action RPG that's sort of like voxel graphics called Forge Quest today, and that's actually been kind of it's kind of fun. It kind of picks on the whole like adventure, going out to do everything. So one of the things that's really funny is you have a rival in the town, and he like talks to you, and you have to go and get an adventurer's license. Because everything has been regulated very much, and you have to fill out an evaluation on your rival. Like, is he being snarky enough? Do you feel driven? Do you feel driven to go and vanquish the baddies and that sort of stuff?
That's great.
So it's a funny little game. Before that, I played an indie RPG called Ninth Dawn 2. Both of these I played with my friend Luke, and Ninth Dawn 2 is about as indie as it gets. I think it was originally like an Android game, and they ported it over. It's got some real issues, but I ended up putting like 5 hours into it. So I just want to give a brief shout out. The other sort of co-op jam I've been messing with is Halo Wars 2.
Oh, do they still have the all units button?
I think they do.
Good. All right. You're done with Halo Wars 2.
Yeah. So here, I mean, like, here's the brief Halo Wars 2 review. Like, right. if you remember this game that came out, that's called like Halo Wars 1. Yes. Or it was just called Halo Wars, actually.
I have some fond memories, or some faint memories of this. I don't know if it's fond, but I have faint memories.
So that game came out. So if you imagine basically if you just put some pretty cutscenes in that game.
Okay.
That's basically what Halo Wars 2 is. There's really nothing new or interesting or revolutionary that's really happening there.
So they made it worse?
It's just got prettier cutscenes.
So they made the same, but added cutscenes, so therefore it's strictly better.
That seems like that's kind of how it seems to me.
Okay, all right, fair enough,
yeah,
fair enough.
So, but I really don't have much to say about that because, it's kind of all been done. It's all so standard RTS fare at this point. I've spent most of my time, actually something like 33 hours in the past couple of weeks, playing this game called Etherlords 2.
Okay.
And it's funny because I really like it. And so I've talked to I think I've actually talked to you about it already. I've talked to Flex about it already. Talked to Ryan about it already. But basically, it is sort of an RPG. The developer's called like Nival or something like that. I don't know. But I saw it looking for kind of card games. And basically, you kind of wander around the overworld, and the enemies that you run into, how like you're playing a Final Fantasy and you run into an enemy in the grass, and then you hear some little graphical exchange, and then you're in your turn-based combat. Basically, whenever you find an enemy in this game, everything stops. You go into the battle, and it's a magic duel. Which, if you guys know anything about me, I dig the Magic the Gathering. I do. I love me some deck building. I love kind of creating some strategies.
For the record, Will is a big deck building guy.
Yeah, so it's a good time.
And also, for the record, I did also play Magic the Gathering, and Will built every deck I ever played. So anyway, continue.
So it's kind of, it seems in some ways like it's tailor-made for me. So after the battle, if you win it, you unlock new cards depending on the enemy that you killed. And also sometimes they will be guarding resource piles that you can use and get. Later, you'll find stores where you can spend these resources that you picked up over the map to actually buy additional cards. Depending on the power of the card, it'll take more or less resources that you found to kind of help you. And the thing that's so neat to me about it is that a lot of the enemies require you to switch your deck up. Like you just can't beat every enemy in the game with the same deck. So, you'll run into a guy, you're like, oh my God, what is he doing? And then you kind of have to go back to the drawing board, and sometimes you find yourself like using these cards that you had in your pool that, you never actually thought you'd actually find an opportunity to use. You're like, oh, okay, well, maybe this will actually help this time because this card has been garbage for most of the game. So I found myself, making some decks that kind of resemble tribal decks. I made a deck that kind of resembled an old deck I had that I called a pain deck. So basically, there was a deck I had in Magic where anytime anybody did anything, they took damage for it. So they could tap a mana, they could attack with a creature, they could play a spell. Everything they did would hurt them. And so I found a card that kind of aped one of these effects in Etherlords, and one of the enemies was so difficult that basically everything I did, he would just deal with. So I found a way to just kind of punish him for doing anything, and I ended up kind of winning that way. The game has like 5 campaigns, which is crazy. Each one of them is probably anywhere from like 5 to 7 hours, I guess, something like that. Maybe a little more. I don't know. I've completed like basically 3.5 of them.
Okay.
And the other kind of weird thing about the game, of course, is you get experience as you fight these guys, and as you get more experience, you will you kind of level up and can choose an upgrade, and your health total goes up a little bit when you upgrade. So it's not just a strict 20 life type of thing like it is in Magic, and you also kind of get access to something else. The only other thing I want to talk about with the game is something that they call a specialization. So as you go through, in addition to unlocking cards, you unlock what are called specializations, and all your enemies have a specialization as well. So for an example, specialization might be you have a chance to automatically pull a card from your graveyard to your hand, like a creature card, and there's a chance on every one of your turns that happens. So that can sort of help you get a little more mileage out of your creatures. There's another one that's like whenever you die, there's a chance you'll be revived at half health, which is not the best because usually if you're dying, your deck sucks anyway, and you really need to go back to the drawing board. But that's an example of a specialization, and so you can kind of course some of the specializations really have synergy with the decks too. So you might want to pick one that kind of goes in with it. So I've really enjoyed the vast majority of the time I've spent with that game. The main issue that I've got is I think you can kind of take one of two paths, but I think either one of the two paths ends you on the final boss. So I got to this final boss, and then I decided to just start another campaign because I tried him a couple times, and he kind of breaks the rules, which really ruins it for me.
Oh, no.
He draws at the beginning of his turn. He draws 4 cards instead of 1. And then
that sounds unfair.
Yeah,
that's not fair at all.
Sometimes when he casts spells, they don't cost any mana. Actually, he seems to do it just about every turn, and it's just really frustrating. So I haven't really come up with a way to beat this guy. He's called like the Pale Lord or some crap like that, but it's horseshit. Anyway, he's not making me happy. But this game came out in like 2003, so I didn't expect to really like latch onto it, and that was kind of going into the last thing I really wanted to talk about. Yeah. Are these other 2 games that I tried?
Well, I do have questions about Etherlords.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
You do play a lot of deck building games. Like, how do you feel like this compares to other deck building video games you played? And kind of tied in with that, I remember, or I think you liked Hand of Fate a lot, and that was a deck building game. It sounds to me like, but it sounds like Etherlords, your combat is the deck part, and if I remember correctly, Hand of Fate, the combat was an actiony thing, and the deck
it was
building
kind of like an Arkham Asylum type of situation where you're, or an Assassin's Creed type of situation where you're kind of like countering and whacking and countering.
Right.
So
maybe the deck building was used in a different way, but I guess the broader question is, like, how does Etherlords compare to Hand of Fate or any other deck building video games you've played?
I would say it's kind of a different sort of riff, I guess. Card Hunter is one that comes to mind, which is sort of like a turn-based grid sort of thing. And then I think a little bit of like Ironclad Tactics, which is another one of these deck building games I really liked. I think it's doing something a little bit different. I do think it probably compares. I think it's kind of similar, though not as complex, maybe to Ironclad Tactics in the way that you have to kind of change up your decks a lot. Which I like it. I like it sort of being forced to kind of adapt, being forced to kind of go back to the drawing board.
When you have to adapt, do you like know that beforehand, or is that like a situation where like you go into some fights and then see your deck's not working, and then you have to kind of adapt after the fact, or do you kind of
so typically what's happened is although your card pool typically differs significantly depending on the campaign. Like I said, that there's 5 different campaigns.
Right.
Pretty much you have 5 different card pools, like a different card pool for each campaign. But some of the enemies are reused. And some of the you might play as one race who kind of their big enemies are the other race, and then when you play with the other race, your big enemies are the first race you played. And so as you go through the campaigns, there's some familiarity there. But of course, because the pool is a little bit different, so you may go into it. And so of course now that I've put like 30 something hours into it, I'll see an enemy and I'll kind of be like, okay, so I know kind of what sort of decks this type of dude uses. So I need to kind of go back to the drawing board and look at my pool and see if I have anything that can really help. Now, when I first started, there was a little frustration on that point because I didn't know what the decks were, but I would just basically, I could hit escape and hit surrender. You don't have to play it to completion, basically just like a forfeit, and then it just kind of scrubs and puts you right back outside the battle again as though you're about to go back into it. The battles aren't really random. The guys are just sort of scattered around the map in sort of a set place. So, to me, it's only maybe 4 or 5 seconds to go back to the drawing board and kind of rebuild my deck.
Okay.
But yeah. And in terms of comparing it, I don't think it compares. I don't think it's really much like some of the other ones I've played, but I've got more card games that I'd like to play, and so maybe I'll find some more fun in that instance.
Yeah. But you're the deck building expert, so I was curious how it fit in your pantheon.
I think, Card Hunter was an absolute blast, but I think the humor in it was really, really strong. Playing it with a friend is really, really cool too, because of course then it's almost like a two-headed dragon situation where your deck, you want to coordinate with your opponent's deck. And so there were times when I played that with Ryan that I would be like, are you bringing this type of card? And he'd be like, yes. And I'd be like, all right, so let me build my deck a little bit differently because I don't need to do that. So it sort of kind
Which, as the game went on, our strategy became invulnerability and Firestorm.
yeah.
I think that summarizes it pretty well.
Yeah, it probably pared down a little bit. But yeah, so the other thing, I guess, especially with you guys who are just, you've got these, tremendously long backlogs, and a lot of you guys seem to be looking at like old games and say, wow, it's interesting that this was such a classic for someone. And I've talked to Flex about this before, but 2 games that I tried this game Armed and Dangerous, which was like a third-person shooter type thing that came out in like, I don't know, 2000 something, maybe just 2000. And supposedly it's hilarious. That's like the selling point. It's like it's a third-person shooter, and there's like a shark gun, and everyone's like, oh, it's got a shark gun. It's so hilarious, And so I tried to do that. And then I got maybe about 30 minutes in, and I tried this one level over and over, and it was like people were spawning behind me, and the controls were super sloppy, not necessarily precise, at least compared to modern sensibilities. The other game I had tried was this game called Kingpin, which is a first-person shooter. I kind of consider myself sort of a first-person shooter historian. So I kind of went back to check this out because I hadn't really heard of it before. Some folks on Steam said they liked it. And it was also really ridiculous. Like, there were aspects of it that I wouldn't have known had I not looked at like a walkthrough. Like, that I could search corpses to get money, and that I could actually talk to people in the game. And things like that I couldn't find in the map controls, but I had to go into a walkthrough to actually figure out. And I hated it as well and quit after about 30 minutes. And so I guess, to me, I guess I'm curious, how do you guys approach some of these older titles that you're curious about with sort of, I guess trying to sort of, or do you feel like in some ways that if you've missed the boat on some of these titles, like that's just it. Like you can't be, you can't be however old this. So you talk to some guy who says, "Well, I remember playing that game when I was 12, and it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen." No. And so I wonder if it's like it was a sort of situation where you can't go home again because now we've seen what technology hath wrought.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is an interesting question. Like, and I'm sure it differs for different people. Like I usually am pretty comfortable going back to old games. And
so I was
I can usually put up with some.
Like I said, 2003. That's what 14 years ago.
Yeah. It's crazy. I think I usually because I have a lot of old games on my backlog as well, and I think oftentimes I'll approach them with kind of like almost an academic curiosity first, and then it's like if like. Ideally, it'll click with me, and I'll still enjoy it, and I'll play it, and it'll be fun.
Rondo of Blood.
Yeah, exactly. That came out in like '93 or something, and that game's still really fun. Like I played the original Deus Ex, like I don't know, 13, 14, whatever years after it came out, and I still really enjoyed that. But I've also gone back, like I tried Fallout 2 at some point, and like I do not think that game holds up at all.
I actually tried that too, and I couldn't get into it either.
Yeah, I think that game is a clunky mess. But like I could see people in the day like being, able or willing to put up with its quirks. That's always an interesting, tricky thing. I also think it speaks highly of the game, like if it does hold up well. Like I think and it's not just technology either. Like I think game design also advances in some ways.
Right.
Yeah. But I think some old things still hold up well. That's always an interesting question, and like different people look for different things when they go back to old games too.
Right. And I mean, sort of to follow on from what Flex was saying, I sort of take the extremely simplistic approach, which is this is an old game. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to play it, and then if I don't enjoy it for any number of reasons, I just stop. And it's like, yes, this game, whatever it is, may have been revolutionary, it may have been popular, it may have been like whatever, like back when it came out. But if I'm not enjoying it right now in whatever year that I'm picking it up, I'm just going to put it down. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to take to the airwaves so everyone can know my opinion about Age of Empires 1 or something like that. It's just
That was
more.
a great game.
You know what? It was a real fun game, but I'm not sure Age of Empires 1 holds up to this particular day and age.
I liked that game at the time. I doubt it holds up.
But Age of Empires
Hello.
2 does. I'm just saying, like there is a difference, but at least for me, I don't make any sort of any sort of excuses for games that were old that I'm playing today, because if I pick up a game and I'm like, man, this is bad, and a good example of this is like the very first Half-Life games, like Half-Life 1, Half-Life Blue Shift, like those games, I just could not get into them in 2015 when I first started to, because they were incredibly old. I had missed that boat. And that's okay to miss the boat. Like, I know those games were good when they came out, but I missed that boat on those games. And I'm not going to, jump up and down about it. I'm just going to go, man, I wish I would have played this before I played so-and-so. Or, like, whatever game that sort of, like, expanded those horizons that made me think that this one is not really great.
Well, I think what we'd like to do here is create a new section called Adult Advice. And the first piece of adult advice is, kids, it's okay to miss the boat. You heard it here. You heard it from Paul. It's okay. Miss the boat.
I do like going, like, with the academic curiosity. Like, there are often times where it's like, Fallout 2 is an example of, like, or Deus Ex is like, those games were highly revered. I missed the boat. Even if I go back and don't like them, there's a part of me that just wants to know. It's like, I just want to see it. I just want to fiddle with it. I want to understand what this thing is, even if I can't understand it in the context of when it came out because I missed that boat. Like, I at least want to have some understanding of what's going on with this thing. So, like, I have... That's probably just me. I'm probably just a weirdo, but I have that weird, like, desire to just know what is this thing? What is video game?
What is a video game?
Yes, that is definitely you. You are the weirdo.
I'll shoulder that burden.
But anyway, so that's really all I had to talk about here.
Right.
And
And it's kind of funny because you were kind of talking about like old games and how they hold up and stuff, and then I just kind of look over here to our little agenda that we have typed up, and the first thing that I see for Mr. Ryan is Final Fantasy II.
Right.
Which
that's not the American Final Fantasy II.
No, that is not.
We're talking about important sequels and important second entries in series and old games. I think it's just very apt to have Final Fantasy II on this list.
So
I've got you guys covered. I've got ATACS back on this one.
So before you get into your Final Fantasy II experience, I would just like to say that I believe that 3 of us here have played Final Fantasy II. Me, Flex, and Nate. You played it, right?
Correct.
All right, so there are 3 of us that have played Final Fantasy II, so I'm just saying, you got some experts on the panel here. So we're going to know if what you say is a little bit stretching the truth of what Final Fantasy II actually is.
I think I mentioned this on an earlier podcast. So there's not an amazing update on the FF2. I actually thought I was getting close to the end game, and a couple podcasts ago, but it's taken me a little longer. I think I was like right before the Mysidian Tower, and now I think I'm truly in the final dungeon. But I guess we shall see. I'm in I think the Whirlwind is what it's called.
Yeah, I don't remember anything about that game, so I can't help you at all.
I actually wouldn't be able to correct Ryan because it's been over a decade since I played that game, and I remember almost nothing. I think the entirety of what I remember from that game is guys speak beaver, dragon in a box, and abusing its broken leveling up system.
Yeah, which is a lot of fun. When I talked about it earlier, that part of the game is pretty fun. But yeah, the only update here is that RPGs are long, and sometimes they are misleading on how far you have to go.
Yeah.
RPGs
are
are
too
long.
like that game's leveling system.
Yeah.
As broken as it was.
The more interesting games I have to talk about are and perhaps more relevant, are games I was kind of early into in our last podcast, which is Horizon Zero Dawn and River City Ransom Underground. Which I should probably start with River City Ransom because that'll be the easier one. If you played the first River City Ransom
in 1988
or anytime since then, and liked it, I personally could give a reasonable nod to River City Ransom Underground. I've heard it's gotten some mixed reviews, which I could potentially see why, because the game's got some rough edges. It is I would consider a reasonably faithful, spiritual successor, if not direct sequel to a kind of clunky NES beat 'em up game, which comes with its benefits and detractions, I guess. But as for my experience, I've been playing it with my brother, and we had a good time. We picked it up, with a little bit of a discount on Steam. It was around $15, which is fairly expensive for that kind of game. But we have no issues spinning up games on Steam, so the co-op works very nicely. And I mean, some of the games like quirkiness and humor and mechanics feel, somewhat faithful to the original game, which says a lot. And it has some fun progression, kind of like the original game did, and a lot of goofiness stuff. Like, we've had a couple times where we were cracking up because of things that were happening, like running into walls and hitting each other with pipes and trash cans and things like that. So for all its warts and its lack of, I won't say that it's not modernized at all. It definitely has some modernization, but for all its kind of old school rough edges, like, I have had a good time with it. So,
well, that's awesome.
Yeah. So that's River City Ransom Underground, and the other game I've been spending a lot of time on is Horizon Zero Dawn, which I guess we can't let Zelda suck all the oxygen out of the room.
Horizon, aka the game that got completely Zelda'd.
Well, I guess that's not entirely true, because those of us who aren't playing Zelda probably are playing Horizon.
The game I want to play and came out 3 days before Zelda, and now I don't know when I'll get to it.
Yeah, there is some truth to that.
August 2017. That's the second big sell date for Horizon Zero Dawn.
Yeah, that game was cool, though.
I guess to sum that one up, I mean, I was discussing this with Flex earlier. I mean, it does feel more like a traditional open world game, which I haven't played tons and tons of open world games, but it does feel like it's in the vein of a polished kind of, I mean, I wouldn't say like a Skyrim, but maybe more like a third person sort of action shootery.
Yeah, the most
model.
Common comparison I've heard is like the Far Cry structure for that game, which is pretty standard open world stuff.
Yeah, but I think the writing is good. The graphics are really good. The environments look great. I think the setting is interesting. The fighting the robots is fun. Like, the loot systems there's some inventory management stuff, but it's mostly good. And I'm close to 30 hours now, and I feel like to do a pretty completionist run, probably another 15, 20 hours, which is not too bad to do a completionist run of a big open world game in 45, 50 hours. That's not super, super long.
Yeah, that's not bad at all.
Yeah, so yeah, overall, and I mean, they have some leveling up and some equipment and stuff like that feels relatively meaningful. It's not like blow my mind stuff, but it's like, some of the better weapons and armors, I can tell, help me take on tougher things. So yeah.
Yeah, Ryan and I were chatting a little yesterday, and I think it'll be really interesting because, as far as I know, Ryan plans on we'll play Zelda at some point, and I actually have Horizon, and we'll definitely play it at some point. I think it'll be really interesting when we kind of flip and like if playing one before the other will like have much influence on like to me like I have to think Zelda will color what I think of Horizon, like just given what that game is. So like I think it'll be an interesting thing to see like what is life in open world games after Zelda and vice versa. Like,
right. Yeah, it's totally a fair point.
I'll be curious to see how that goes for both of us.
I would be really surprised though if you just said like I'll never enjoy another open world game again.
Oh no, I'm not expecting that at all.
I doubt
like
Zelda's
I
gonna
fully
have that
expect I will
powerful.
still enjoy Horizon.
Yeah, I mean the gameplay is still fun and the story is still pretty entertaining and enjoyable. So like, it's not like it's just going to be a worse game because Zelda is out.
No, I'm not expecting that at all. I don't think Zelda will make me like Horizon less. But I think having played Zelda before Horizon, I could envision like thinking about the things Horizon does as I'm playing it and like things it could potentially have done differently if it was trying. Like I don't think that'll make Horizon feel like a worse game, but I guess I'm just curious how much Zelda will like color how I see other open world games. That's really the thing I'm wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the one thing I will say, minor-ish spoiler alert, is that aside from a little bit of inventory management, which isn't super bad, it's just every now and then, you have to bust out and clean out some stuff. But the side quests, I think, are fairly one note. The writing around them is pretty good, but the actual gameplay tends to be pretty similar. They picked a pattern that was reasonably cool, and then they just applied it to like probably 80-90% of the side quests. That's what it feels like to me.
It's an open world game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I do have a question about your and you might have said and I might have missed it, but how much time have you put into Horizon at this point, do you think? Is it a lot?
I'm close to 30 hours.
Okay, yeah. So I think my like summary question for how you're feeling about the game would be is what is sort of your main propellant in playing and enjoying the game at that point? Is it that you're really enjoying the combat and the progression mechanics, or is it more of the story and the setting? Or I guess it could be a combination of the two, but is there one of those sides of the game that's really more appealing to you at this point?
I would say a combination. I still enjoy, and I still do spend a lot of time exploring, doing the smaller side quests, like, fighting monsters randomly. I've dialed back on that a little bit, not because it's tiring, but just because I do want to actually get through some of the content and not kill every herd of monster, or, every herd of animals and pick every flower along the path. That's like the common open world thing. So
yeah.
I've dialed back on that just a little bit to focus more on things, but I'm not super far into the main story. I've just been kind of poking at it as it's been in the areas, but that also seems pretty solid. And the side quests, the writing part of it, like there's the world and setting, like, and even the kind of the civilizations or the tribes that populate the world have I think a fairly interesting lore to them, right. And that's what some of the side quests explores. So
that's cool.
So yeah, I would say a combination. And with these games, like, I feel like it's on a good trajectory because I'm at 30 hours. I'm still enjoying it.
Yeah.
And I think we'll see in another 10 hours. Like, that's when sometimes these kind of games tend to crest and start getting a little tiring. But I feel like probably a good 15 to 20 more hours would be a very completionist run. We'll see if that holds up. And so far, I'm enjoying the ride.
Yeah,
that's cool.
It is interesting because I tend to be very skeptical of long games, and this year has had a lot of really long games already. But it is nice that games like Zelda and Horizon, despite their length, are able to be interesting for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, sort of moving to the complete opposite end of the spectrum of open world games, it's time for the bi-weekly Trails of Cold Steel update.
It's like Final Fantasy 2.
Yeah. Boy. So, good news. I have finished Trails of Cold Steel. It is done.
What are we going to do? What kind of update are we going to have?
Well, it's going to be very exciting. I'm glad you asked, William, because Trails of Cold Steel ends on a cliffhanger. And spoilers.
Trails of
Do you still have to finish the fight, Paul?
You know what? It's kind of funny because Trails of Cold Steel started in the most innocent and JRPG terms possible. You're a dude and you're in a school. That's cool. By the end, you are the anime and you jump into a mech. And then your mech can't beat the other mech, so you fly away. And that is the end of the first game. That's really all that you need to know. Yeah.
So should we call you Mr. Anime now?
No, you should.
Sir Anime?
No, that's not.
No.
I have to,
no.
As the host, I veto this. But no, I mean, like that. Just my last Trails of Cold Steel update that I have for the entire podcast is, it was a game. It was a game that went too long.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It only took me 67 or 68 hours to beat. And I mean, honestly, the story did move at a decent clip for the first 50 or 55 hours. It's just the last, 15 that were a problem, which is also the total length of a great number of AAA games in the last couple of years. So yeah, I don't know that I can give a recommendation for that game, but I also can say that if you don't have any money and you can buy a Vita and you can buy this game for less than $100 combined, which I'm pretty sure you can spend a lot of time, a ton of time playing this game. So it had some interesting story.
You can get Persona 4 Golden, and then you're set for the next decade.
So, and actually the very interesting piece is that this game paced pretty well with Persona 4 Golden until the last, like I say, 10-ish hours. Right. Like, Persona 4 Golden is also a very long game, right? But
yeah, you could say that.
But Persona 4 doesn't really slow down in the way that Trails of Cold Steel does. They both start very strong, and that's kind of where I got into it in the first place. And the game pulls you in a way that makes you want to finish, but finishing is painful in a way that it's not for Persona 4 or not for a lot of other JRPGs. Like, there's a lot of JRPGs that may have weaknesses in the beginning or weaknesses in the middle. This one has weaknesses at the end, which makes it really difficult to finish the game. But I did because that's just what I do. Also, the TV was being taken up by the Switch and Steph playing Breath of the Wild, so what else are you going to do? So I did finish that, and I am sure at some point, about 12 months from now, I will purchase Trails of Cold Steel 2 when I forget how much I disliked the ending of the first one.
It is a bummer when you like a game and then it just goes on too long. That is probably for me one of the things that makes me the saddest about a game is if I'm liking it for some amount of time and then it just keeps going and then I start liking it less.
Yeah, that's one of the things that will really sour my whole view of a game is if I have to really struggle through the last 5 to 10% of it.
Yeah,
and I feel like once you pass 40 or 50 hours, you become at a super high risk for that. I feel like stretching past that. I mean, 40 or 50 hours is a long time, and I feel like any past that, you are you better be doing something pretty darn special.
Yeah.
Right, and I mean, at least for me, I'm someone who, I would say that I'm okay with a lot of, role playing games that kind of go on long. Like that's just I have a pretty high tolerance for that. This particular game, you got to the 55-hour mark, and you're like, all right, I just beat the final boss, right? And then the game's like, nah, dude, you got a whole another chapter to go. And it's like, what? You finished telling the story, Mr. Video Game. What do you have left? And then it's like, oh, no, here's like 7 hours of just epilogue. And I was like, okay, well, epilogue's fine. I'll go talk to my party members. And then at hour number 5 of the epilogue, something else happens. And it's like, no, I resolved the story. You can't just have something just pop up out of nowhere, like right near the end. It's like, oh, but we can. By the way, cliffhanger. And it's like, no, okay, fine. Okay, guess what? I finished the game.
Smacking you around.
Yeah, and also the difficulty of the battles, and this is the last thing I'm going to say. The difficulty of the battles by the end got to the point to where the game has this sort of functionality to where if you are defeated in a battle, you can retry it with weakened enemies. It's basically a way to say, hey, yeah, you know what, you weren't good enough to beat this boss, so we'll make it weaker for you. Well, by the end, it was like, I'm not going to spend any of my items or any of my time. Just go ahead and kill me twice so I can weaken this down to a realistic level, and then this will be a decent challenge. And that just tells me one of two things. Either I did not grind enough in the limited grinding sections of the game, or after 65 hours, I had no idea how to play the game. One of the two. Either one of these are possible. Yeah, or both. That's also a fair point. Totally. But the fact that I had to start every battle near the end of the game with like, all right, just kill me and I'll make you weaker. All right, just kill me again because, Jesus Christ, you hit me for half of my main character's health, and he has all the best gear in the game. Just go ahead and kill me again, and then, okay, all right, now you're down to something that I consider reasonable. Like, that was kind of annoying, and also just felt like a time sink because, like, yeah, sure, I can spend all this time using all these items and all these one-use sort of things, but even if this all fails, I'll just make you weaker and try again next time. And it's just sort of removed, like, the challenge felt unfair to begin with, but the fact that I had to go through effort to remove the challenge by itself also seemed kind of silly. So no, I mean that game definitely in its last 5 hours felt very unfair, very drawn out, and just kind of bad in the way that really it didn't deserve. Like, its first 65, which sounds ridiculous. I mean, yeah, its first 65 may have fluttered between really good and mediocre, but its last 5 just took a nosedive in a way that it never should have.
That's a bummer.
Yeah. So the only other thing besides Zelda, which I've been playing, is Final Fantasy VI. Steph and I started playing that kind of jointly for our Final Fantasy cast, which we're still planning to do one day. And we're only about an hour and a half in, so I don't really have too much to say about it, other than one really annoying thing that I never thought that I would find, which is that game, like as far as when you're inside of a house or inside of a town, boy, you better be pixel perfect to go in a door, because if you're not, you're gonna just run into a wall. And
what version are you playing?
I'm playing it on the Game Boy Advance.
Okay.
We're playing it on an emulator. So I did some Googling. That seemed to be the best version of that game. But in terms of just like sort of small things, which, I mean, frankly, it is silly. It is kind of like a small, silly thing. It's just like, man, whenever we played Bravely Default, there were all kinds of pixels that you could run in through and still get into these doors. Like, for this one, it's like, nope, you got to go to the right one, and then you'll get in this door. You go up these stairs or down these stairs, and it's just like, in this town, this is really annoying. Getting out of the town's fine, but just like when you're in this small spot with all of these characters walking around and all these doors, just get out of the way and just, yes, I want to go in the door. Don't make me run to the right, like, one square and then go up again. But
That's not where I expected that to go, but
well, and that's really the only thing. Like, the rest of it's been sort of, it feels very fast paced because neither of us have really played Final Fantasy Final Fantasy VI before. It feels very fast-paced.
Yeah, that game moves.
It starts fast, especially.
It starts real fast, but it also hasn't really done. It hasn't really done enough for me to talk about with us only being an hour and a half or 2 hours
you're
in.
Pretty early.
Yeah, we're pretty early, but that is the one thing where both me and Steph were just like, this door's right here. Just go into it. And
it's been a long time since I played a 2D Final Fantasy or a 2D JRPG, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was actually kind of common back in the day, just like fiddly things like that.
Yeah, you're probably right. It was just kind of interesting that was one of the grumbles that we had, starting the game. But like I didn't expect that particular one. Is all. But I think that's probably going to wrap us up for talk about video games. We are going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back with at least a couple of news stories, and then we're going to move into what we are playing next. So stay tuned, and we will be back right after this break. Welcome back to ATACS. We are adults. We're talking about cool stuff. And we are moving into our news section. And the first cool thing that we have to talk about for news is StarCraft Brood War. It will be remastered. That has been announced by Blizzard.
That's a cool stuff.
That is a cool stuff. And
I like the StarCrafts.
I played a lot of StarCraft 2. In fact, I played a lot of StarCraft 2 with Mr. Flex. And I never really got the whole StarCraft Brood War deal because I wasn't around in those days. But them goings backs and making this into a more modern style and a more modern game while using the same basic gameplay engine for balancing things, that's pretty neat, and I think that's definitely newsworthy.
So I actually missed this news. I remember it being rumored a while ago, so I guess they officially confirmed it recently, but just to clarify, is this the entire StarCraft plus Brood War, like the campaign from all of that being remastered?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
Are they remastering the multiplayer?
Yes.
That teaser video that I saw did not really tell me much.
It doesn't
just
tell you much.
It just shows you a lot of StarCraft 1 footage, which looks horribly dated.
So,
and I guess I shouldn't say definitively. I'm pretty sure it's the campaigns too. I know it's the multiplayer.
So is that gonna like fracture the multiplayer base?
Well, so the idea is the multiplayer base will move to this new thing that Blizzard is putting out, because the new thing that Blizzard is putting out will be free.
Well, no, the new thing's not free.
I thought it was. I thought I read that.
So here's the breakdown, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my understanding, is that they will update Brood War, which is currently or very recently was on version 1.16, and they will update it to 1.18, which will be free. So they will update Brood War, the original Brood War, to be free for everyone.
And then
they're releasing the remaster, which will be for some cost. I don't think they've announced, but they will be compatible, so people with the free version can play alongside people with the remastered version. So it doesn't split the player base. It just gives people a free option or an upgraded option.
Right. Well, I was talking. So I have new questions, but my original question was
splitting it from StarCraft 2 is what you
exactly.
Yeah.
So now, like, if you're a StarCraft pro, what do you play?
Yeah.
And like, if I want to play multiplayer StarCraft, like, I'm guessing I'm going to either play StarCraft 2 or the new Brood War, and like, I imagine those scenes being very I imagine one of those scenes is going to ultimately win out.
Yeah.
But what it sounds like to me is that they're going to be like right now. Over the past few years, it's basically been if you want to play StarCraft, like I'm sure there are diehards still playing Brood War, but for the most part, if you're playing StarCraft, you're going to play StarCraft 2. Now it sounds like they're going to be splitting it, which is going to make the user base like even smaller.
So there were definitely people that were still playing Brood War.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think
there's
this
still people
is
playing like I don't know, Doom 1 multiplayer.
Counter-Strike.
Yeah, but I think there was still a fairly sizable community of people still playing Brood War at a competitive level. And I think this is like I don't think the sense I've gotten is that they're not intending to like do any further balance patches or keep updating the game. This is just like, hey, here's a new option for you people who still really like Brood War.
Okay.
Right, but see the thing that I was going to say was like I haven't been into this scene in a while. I mean, it's been about a year. I used to watch a ton of StarCraft 2 professional events, and like basically when I stopped watching StarCraft 2 was when the player base and the pro player base as well, they had both dived to the point to where you ask the question of what are the pros going to do? Are they going to play Brood War or StarCraft 2? Most of those people that were playing StarCraft 2 had either already went back to Brood War for whatever random events were going on there, or they had already moved on to different games. Like StarCraft 2 really...
We lost them to the MOBAs.
Yeah, and I mean StarCraft 2 really took a dive in calendar year 2016. And I don't have numbers. I was looking for that while Nate was talking, but I can't find it right off. But I know that when I stopped watching StarCraft, which was it was somewhere around the spring of last year, so about 1 year ago, there was a noticeable drop off of pro talent to other games. They had either gone back to Brood War or moved on to Dota. And I'm just making that up. Like, it's not really Dota, but they moved on to somewhere else.
Yeah.
So this coming out, I don't think you have to worry about fracturing the player base as much as giving the player base that an updated version of Brood War to play, which had been a lot more robust than what StarCraft 2 had been.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, like, because I mean, I was watching the StarCraft Pro scene until a few months ago, and I fell off because of time, not because of interest. But I thought it was better than ever, at least in terms of watching. I do think maybe some of the pros complained that it was a pretty tough game to play, but as far as being a fun game to watch, like, and seeing awesome tournaments, like, I felt like I missed some really good tournaments. And I think, like Bjorn, you still got some really great top talent, in both the Korea and the Western scene. You've got like Nurchio and Snoot, and you've got like Bjorn and Harding and Solar. So I am curious if this new version of Brood War, I mean, I guess Blizzard will back whatever they want to be the real version. Like, they'll patch and put tournament support. It sounds like maybe they're not going all in into reviving Brood War, which I think would be a very odd decision.
Yeah, I don't think that's their move. I actually kind of think that, they released Legacy of the Void, which was the last sort of thing in StarCraft 2, and they're obviously still supporting that game a lot. But I think it's been pretty clear that they don't have any real like big future plans for the StarCraft franchise.
Right.
And so I think this is almost like a way of capping off, like, if people really like StarCraft, and whether you like Legacy of the Void or Brood War, like, we're going to have both of those options ready for you if that's what you want to do. And I don't necessarily know if they're thinking about it as like, we're going to support this community over that community, but I just kind of think that they're not really thinking about like anything big for StarCraft in the near future, so they're just kind of giving those communities what they need to do what they want to do.
Right. The remaster, is it like, do you know many details about what's being, because you said there's going to be Brood War 1.8 and then also the remaster, like, is the remaster going to be a big graphical overhaul and like the StarCraft 2 engine, or like do you know what the details are there?
So it's mostly a graphic and audio overhaul. So they're up-resing stuff. It uses all the same. One interesting thing, it uses the original graphics assets and stuff, and it uses the actual same gameplay code. So they even said in the remastered version you'll be able to run old Brood War replays because it's so mechanic exact.
Okay.
So they do have screenshots.
So still only 12-person control groups?
Yeah, mechanically the same game. They're not updating it to like StarCraft 2 mechanics in any way.
Yeah.
It does look nicer if you look at the screenshots. Everything looks cleaner.
Yeah. So like I'm looking at this Kotaku article that someone linked, and there's a image that shows like a refresh.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, it looks a little nicer. So is that the remaster, or is that 1.8 that the newer thing is?
That's probably the remaster.
Okay, so the remaster really is actually just going to look like
Brood War. It looks
like,
exactly like Brood War. It's just a little sharper, a little cleaner.
I didn't know if it was going to look like Brood War or look like StarCraft 2.
No, it's exactly the same look and gameplay as Brood War.
So this really is just like a light graphical update.
Yeah, I think the interesting stuff about it is that Brood War will be a fully free to play game, and then you have this option to buy the remastered version. And those two communities will be able to play together.
And presumably they'll be in the Blizzard launcher now, or whatever they're calling it.
And then they can release skins and announcer packs.
Sure.
Yeah.
Many hats.
I mean, it is a potential revenue stream for them if they want to go that route. And then there's something I linked to a Team Liquid interview, which is a pretty big force in the competitive StarCraft community, and they answer some other stuff about it. And they kind of hinted at the idea of having like a full ladder system and stuff in there for the remaster, which Brood War never had. So that would be interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good feel good move for them for this game that people still really love. Is really the big takeaway for me.
Yeah, so my question for you guys, like, all of us have played some amount of StarCraft. I really liked StarCraft and Brood War back in the day. The idea mechanically of playing that game's multiplayer, to me, like, I don't think I would want to go back to that over StarCraft 2. Like, where do you guys, like, would you guys want to go back to that? Do you guys prefer StarCraft 2 just purely for multiplayer stuff? Like, where does this interest you guys at all?
No, I mean it doesn't interest me, and I will also sort of like raise my hand and say I still play Age of Empires 2 from time to time, the revised Steam version, but you know, at least to me, from what I've read, this feels more like something that is geared towards the people that played a lot of, you know, the Brood War multiplayer, whether it was pro or amateur or just casual. This just seems like a technical update for those folks who really liked that game to continue playing it on modern PCs, on modern operating systems. That's what this feels like to me, but then again, I haven't read every single little piece of this.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
On the side, I can say it doesn't really excite me. I haven't played the. I think I played the first, the StarCraft original, and then Brood War. Maybe it's probably like within the last 5 years I played both of those, I think. And you know, a graphical update's not really going to make me want to revisit them. But I don't really play them. I didn't really play them for the multiplayer either.
Yeah.
On a side note, there's an interesting article published on a blog called "Illiteracy Has Downsides." And the article is titled "StarCraft 2 and Brood War Belong to Different Genres." And it's a pretty cool article, because he describes how the technical differences between kind of what he calls like classic versus modern RTS games almost make them like he argues that they're so different that they're almost like different subgenres of games. And then he talks about like how because the mechanics are different, and I think there's like so much more economic micromanagement in the old games. I guess because of the worse AI and the harder controls, that it can encourage certain things like turtling and steamrolling that you don't really see as much in games like StarCraft 2. Whereas
I will not tolerate any smack talk about the Dragoon AI.
It's pretty bad, guys.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean,
I don't know what you're talking about. That pathing was amazing.
I'm not gonna dive into the article, but when I read it, I could kind of see it. Like, I'm not a hardcore old school, but I do remember struggling a lot more with those old games than with new games, just because if you didn't micromanage something perfectly, your unit would just go off and do something useless, or sit there and not collect resources. So,
Right.
and for my money, like, my opinion means nothing. I'm not even remotely like a qualified RTS player, but I think the quote unquote modern games are way more fun.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of one of those, like, you always fall into one of two camps, right? You either fall into the camp of, man, this old game had it right, and we haven't made it better since. The other camp is, nah, look at all these improvements that we've made, and the only attachment to this old game is nostalgia. And I mean, and I think that there's actually validity to both of those camps. I think that like, in general, if someone's like, nah, dude, Brood War is amazing, I'm gonna go play Brood War, coming from playing a lot of StarCraft 2, and I'm gonna go, wow, this is horrible. How can your pathing be this bad and you consider this game anywhere close to good? And it's like, well, if you would have played this back in the day, it's like, well, I didn't. I'm playing it in 2017. What do you want me to do? And I think that there are arguments there on both sides, which is part of the reason why I don't really have any strong feelings about, a modernized version of Brood War, because I played a ton of StarCraft 2, and then I go back and I look at some Brood War replays from, like, like the good old times, and I'm like, wow, this is just technically silly in a lot of different ways. But I think that both of those points are fair, because Brood War was balanced in a very... I mean, it was balanced in a way that it's difficult to do that in modern games. And I don't know that any game has really done it as well as Brood War. But I still don't think that Brood War is the pinnacle of RTS stuff, like some of those diehards kind of say. So I think it's just sort of
obviously that's Red Alert 2.
Obviously it's Red Alert 2, because Tanya wasn't broken at all. Blowing up buildings with
what other
one
games
clip.
are we talking about here?
Any of them. Anyway, that's really all that we're looking at for the Brood War remaster. I am curious, and I will be checking out Team Liquid over the course of the next several weeks to just sort of see how that plays out in the pro scene, because a lot of pros from Brood War moved to StarCraft 2 just because it kind of felt like it was time. So I'm wondering what happens to the StarCraft 2 pro scene with Brood War sort of rolling back into the mix. That's going to be interesting to see over the course of the next few weeks.
I mean, unless the money support goes away, I don't think you'll see a huge shift. Not that it's impossible, but I mean, pros play for money to make checks, and unless Blizzard stops paying for StarCraft 2 tournaments.
But that's what I'm curious about, is what is the money that will be poured back into Brood War because there is a more modern / pretty version of it. I don't know the answer to that question. All I know is that in South Korea, where all of this sort of blew up, in South Korea, Brood War was huge. And then StarCraft 2 kind of came along, and that was cool. But then they sort of, like, were still showing Brood War on their pro gaming channels and sort of jumped straight from Brood War into things like League of Legends or Heroes of New Earth. Like, StarCraft 2 never caught on the way that Brood War did in that particular market. So I am curious to see how that sort of moves on.
you got to feel a weird sense of irony about, because like StarCraft 2 came out, like, and Wings of Liberty came out, and it was incredibly well received, and people were like, oh, this is going to revive RTSs, and then like the next year MOBAs blew up, and everyone moved to MOBAs, and StarCraft 2 was dead for those purposes. And like there's like a really ironic timing to how all of that worked out, and it's like RTSs are back. Now MOBAs.
Hello, we brought back the real-time strategy game. Now screw that. Here's Dota. No, I definitely get that. So the next news story that we wanted to talk about was the left Joy-Con for the Nintendo Switch. Apparently, some of the people that were having issues with the syncing of the left Joy-Con when they grabbed it with their big meaty hands and then turned around and clutched it inside of themselves behind a lead sheet, they were wondering why that might potentially have it desync with the Switch itself. Turns out that, number one, you should not have your Joy-Con behind a lead sheet, but also, number two, according to Jason Schreier of Kotaku, there was a manufacturing variation which caused some problems with the left Joy-Con syncing with the Switch console itself. And basically what I want to say to all of this is, maybe it's just me, but I just bought a Pro Controller and I don't care. So I know that's probably not fair to any of the people who are having this issue, but
you're so thoughtful, Paul.
Well, I mean, like me and my wife, we bought a Switch, and when we bought the Switch, we took the Joy-Cons and we put it into the tiny piece of plastic, which made it a controller that it came with, and we never had any problems. And then I bought a Pro Controller because I am a sophisticated man who needs the best that Nintendo can offer for playing video games. And since we've had a Pro Controller, our Joy-Cons have been attached firmly to the side of the Switch, only to be used during the detached mode. So none of this has been a problem for me, and I've just sort of looked at it across the internet and have chuckled with my monocle that the peasants are having such problems. But I mean, the fact that this is something that is a manufacturing variant that one of their suppliers just sort of took it upon themselves to make this Joy-Con a little more cheaply, but also having signal issues, sort of speaks to maybe this isn't so much a Nintendo problem as it is a dude in a manufacturing plant tried to muddle with the plans himself, and that caused an issue.
Yeah, I love the way Nintendo worded it. It's a manufacturing variation. It's like collect all
problem.
Different covers of issue 1 of your comic book. It's like get all variations of the Switch. Just it's not any worse. It's just different. It's a variant.
It's just different. It's okay.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't do this. There was some random dude in Taiwan who just changed the circuitry, and then it was all a problem. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how they worked it.
It's not losing connection. It's just differently connected.
It's a very creative interpretation.
Yes.
You have to open your mind. Nintendo is good at opening people's minds.
Yeah, it is a little weird that kind of stuff can happen, though. Just like different plants that these things are made in, factories or whatever that these things are made in, can do that. Has anyone actually had issues with this? Because I haven't. I don't know if I just lucked out or what, but
I have a little bit, actually. I have noticed a couple of times when I'm walking around in Zelda that I will try to make a turn. Like I'll be running forward and try to either stop or turn around or turn to the side, and he'll just keep going for a second or two, and I'm like, that's weird. But it hasn't really been an issue.
I have not experienced that, so I guess.
Have totally noticed sometimes where the controls are not responding on the left joystick.
Yeah. Well, congrats, you got one of the special variants.
Yeah, well, I'm going to sell that for a lot of money later on.
Collector's item.
I didn't realize that I was on this podcast with a peasant.
Yeah, I didn't drop the
with
big,
just a regular
the
old
big
plebe.
wallet on a Pro Controller either, so I'm stuck with my variant Joy-Con over here in little old Wendell.
In little old Wendell. And you know what? You can't even find a Pro Controller because your nearest GameStop is 3 hours away in Virginia.
That's right. What is a Pro Controller?
What is that?
You'll eventually get there in your horse and buggy.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, like this like Nintendo has really gotten out there, and they're like, this isn't our fault. This was a random project manager in Taiwan that screwed everything up. I mean, like they've really kind of gotten out there to try and spin that story, and they're
It's just funny.
I mean, I have seen some sort of like smattered reports that if you are having left Joy-Con connectivity problems and you send that Joy-Con back to Nintendo customer support, that they are providing you a different Joy-Con with the conductive foam, which solves all your problems. But they really have been pretty aggressive, saying it's like, nope, not our fault. Someone else took it upon themselves, and we're fine.
Yeah, I don't really care whose fault it is. If they have a method to fix it, then I will probably try to figure that out and leverage it. But I'm gonna wait until I'm done with Zelda, because I can take advantage of their long drought of game releases to just send them my Joy-Con and get them to fix it.
And that is a very fair point. Because you know what, guys, the Switch, even though it's only got one game, is selling great. So GameStop has reported that it will be expecting Switch shortages for basically this entire calendar year 2017. And there's been some smattering of reports. The latest, or the biggest one from Polygon, basically saying that Nintendo is going to double its orders of Switch from manufacturing plants, hopefully not from the ones that had the left Joy-Con variant problem. So Nintendo is going to double its order from manufacturing plants. GameStop says they're not expecting to see a steady supply of Switches for the rest of the calendar year. And despite there only being one game out for the Switch, really, boy, is it doing a good job right out of the gate.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, I would not have expected this, but yeah, I mean, they're straight up. Their projections were for the fiscal year starting next weekend, April 2017. They were projecting to make and ship 8 million Switches, and now they're projecting 16 million. Like, they're just straight up doubling that. So like,
Yeah.
I was like,
I wonder
that's a big difference. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what was going on that made it be off by that much or what, but that's crazy.
Yeah, I wonder what all goes into that decision, because you have to assume that they would have thought, like, we're still within a month of the thing coming out.
Yeah.
You would have assumed that they would have expected it to be sold out for the first month, because I think that's reasonable for a new console.
Yeah, everything. I mean, the Wii U sold out in its first month.
And so I wonder what evidence, anecdotal or not, they're using to say, like, oh, demand for this is actually higher than we thought. I'd be curious to know where that's coming from.
Probably they got a guy who's just taking down tally marks. Somebody going to Target. They go into Target and they'll say, "Hey man, I'm looking for a Switch," and the guy says, "Hold on, let me get a piece of notebook paper out." He puts a little tally mark down on it, and then he basically folds that piece of paper up, sends it to Nintendo, and says, "We're going to need at least as many as we have tally marks here in the store."
It's actually just Miyamoto. He's going around just in a Fox McCloud mask, just in Targets around the world.
I like
taking down tallies.
And the funny part is that I got my Switch on release day at a Target, so this all sounds perfectly legitimate to me.
I have to imagine Zelda's driving a lot of. I mean, because like that thing, Breath of the Wild is like the best system seller a game has had, or a platform has had at launch in I don't know how many generations.
Well,
like, there's normally,
which is hilarious because
you don't have launch games that good
regularly.
Yeah, and like the thing that I've been seeing is that I saw a story from GameStop somewhere that basically said that Breath of the Wild was selling at close to a 1-to-1 attachment rate with the Switch. So people, like every person that bought a Switch also bought Zelda, which I think also is one of those things to where no one really bought a Wii U in the grand scheme of things. And then, the Switch came out, and then Zelda came out, and everyone went, "Oh, Zelda, I like that game." Oh,
Yeah.
you want me to buy it with the Wii U? Ah, screw you. Give me that Switch thing over there. You know?
Yeah, and the reviews for all that stuff just came out like right when the system launched. So like I could totally see a situation of this wake up call being like, oh wait, Zelda's actually good, and I didn't buy a Wii U because who did? Now I want to Switch.
Which kind of happened to me. I mean, I
Yeah.
am one of those people who
Yeah,
fall into that demographic.
So you
I
feel like
feel like Paul is like evidence A for like what's going on with the Switch right now.
so you're saying that Zelda's moving more copies of the Switch than Perfect Dark Zero moved to the Xbox 360.
It makes sense, right? I mean, or a lot of people bought a PS Vita specifically for Persona 4 Golden. So,
Okay.
how many people just bought a Vita, Persona 4 Golden, finished Persona 4, and then just gave both of them back? You know, I'm wondering what that number looks like and how that's gonna
I don't know.
compare to the Switch.
The other amusing part of this to me is they're saying in this fiscal year they want to manufacture 16 million Switches. The total lifetime sales of the Wii U worldwide was about 13 million.
Wow.
So just think about that for a second.
Yeah, and I just happened to scroll across something today, which didn't make it into our news section, but Mr. Reggie is saying that Nintendo is going to have an exceptional E3 for both the 3DS and the Switch. So I'm curious to see how the 3DS fits into their future plans, even though I don't really expect it to at all. So yeah.
I did.
Radiant
I did
Historia
see
remake on the 3DS, right?
Yeah, Radiant Historia remake looks real fun. I'll get back to you once I finish the Zelda in about 6 months.
I mean, and Zelda, I definitely think is a big component of selling the Switch. But I think without a game, it would be it would definitely be harder to justify purchasing that system. Like the fact I have a Wii U, and I still am more optimistic about buying a Switch probably later this year, just because I know there's at least one good game. It looks like there'll probably be a handful of others, but I would also
they
say,
are promising Mario Odyssey later this year, which will hopefully be good as well.
Right.
Yeah, I will also say that I think compared to the Wii U, like the Switch also just looks like a much more marketable product. Like it looks pretty sleek. Like it's getting reasonably good reviews in terms of like just having a smooth, I think, user experience, and it looks kind of like a tablet / gaming thing, and I think a lot of people are bought into the fact that Nintendo does good handhelds. So I think there's like a much more marketable product, in addition to the fact that they have a pretty amazing sounding system selling game.
I mean it's hard to imagine that thing doing well right now if Zelda didn't exist. But but at the same time, I do really like, this is another thing I've realized over the past 2 weeks, is I really like the Switch hardware, and I think it really does deliver on the promise of play it on your TV or on the go, because I've done both, and they're like, I've always been someone who likes both consoles and handhelds, and I have felt that in the past 2 weeks with the Switch, where I felt the benefits of both of those kind of form factors, and like I think it's a really nice piece of hardware. Like I think it feels solidly made. I think all the menus are really snappy and stuff. Like I think it's comfortable to hold even in handheld mode. Like I think there's still a lot to be seen on the service end with Virtual Console and their online stuff. Like I think there's a lot of big question marks there. But I think in terms of being a thing to play Zelda on, either on a TV or in your hands, I think it's a very well-made piece of hardware.
Yeah.
So I guess this goes to show, if anybody from Oculus or Vive is listening, this goes to show the power of first-party development and making amazing games for your hardware platforms.
And messaging too. Like if you think about the messaging they had on the Wii U, that thing was a mess.
Yeah.
Like they've made their promise with the Switch and it works.
Well, I don't know. The Switch's messaging, I think the product is carrying itself better than the messaging.
Definitely carrying it to some degree.
That initial press conference, I was like, I don't know what they're delivering. It's like I had all these aspirations for this hardware, and I don't even know what it's going to do.
Well, Ryan, I can tell you it will play a whole bunch of Neo Geo games right now. You go to the eShop, boy, you can buy a lot of Neo Geo games.
Your
Oh,
boy's
boy.
hamster got you covered.
I'm just saying, like, none of those games are really on my list of what I'm playing next because they're all bad. Really,
Expensive?
it's probably the best way to say that. But I'm still planning on playing some Zelda. And also Steph and I will continue our forays into Final Fantasy VI. But the one new thing that I'll be starting, and a lot of the reason that I'll be starting this is because I'm traveling for work for the next couple of days, is I'm going to start Final Fantasy VIII. In a real earnest way, because I actually bought Final Fantasy VIII on the Vita back when it was on one of the Square Enix sales. I think I got it for like $5. So I've not played Final Fantasy VIII before, and I will be in New Hampshire for the next couple of days for work. So I will be playing Final Fantasy VIII, at least a few hours of it here in the next couple of days. But that's what's coming up next for me. Flex, what do you have going on besides? I guess a bit more Zelda for you. Anything else going on in your realm of the world?
Is there anything else?
I'm asking you because I just see Zelda on your list of what you're going to go to.
Until
mean-
Zelda's done, I don't know what.
It sounds
what are
like
video games.
It sounds like too. Once Zelda is done, all these other open world games that are out this year just aren't going to be the same anymore.
I don't
are
know what life
ruined.
after Zelda. will
Zelda
look like.
has ruined gaming
Yeah,
for
it'll
Flex.
be a weird thing.
So
But yeah, I don't know how much time I'll have to play over the next 2 weeks because I am doing a move, but I pretty much expect most of it to be Zelda. Someday in the far off future, I will finish Neo.
no, you're not.
Probably not before the next time we podcast. So between now and then, it's probably going to be Zelda.
All right, and
Hey, Persona 5 comes out next week. How about that, huh?
yeah, how about
Great,
that?
another long game for everybody to not have time to play.
That game looks pretty good, you guys.
Persona 5 comes out like next week. You gonna be ready?
Yep.
She says she's gonna be ready, so she'll be done with Zelda next week.
All right, perfect.
It's not gonna happen.
How are those classes going?
Yeah, well, those classes, thankfully, are getting near the end of their semester, so I expect her first couple weeks of summer will be just dedicated to Persona 5. That's where I expect her to go with that. Nate, do you have anything other than Zelda that you're planning on playing relatively soon?
Not at all.
Oh.
Probably the next 2 to 3 weeks, I will probably be done with Zelda and then moving on to Horizon, but that may not be before the next time we talk.
William, say something that isn't Zelda, please.
Keep playing
Just say Zelda.
some of the games that I talked about
you
here.
want to.
Gonna probably keep playing Etherlords 2, Halo Wars 2, Forge Quest. I wanted to start a hacking game from an old school hacking game called Uplink. It seems kind of similar to Hacknet, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Okay.
And I've been playing a little bit of Rock Band 4 on the PS4, but it is really nothing at all new or innovative about that. It's just Rock Band.
Sure.
Yeah.
You don't have to lie, Will. We all know you secretly have a Switch and are just playing Zelda all the time.
It's okay.
Yeah.
We're here for you.
He plays all these other games for
You
like
don't-
15 minutes so he can talk about it. He's a closet
You
Zelda
don't
player.
have to feel shame about this, Will. We're here. We're supportive.
He pulls it out while he's at work.
Just not sure.
I'm
I can't find all the seeds, guys.
Last thing I'm gonna say about Zelda, and then we have to go because this has already gone off the rails. I totally took in the the Switch tablet to work one day and played it during my planning period. So yeah,
Oh,
Nice.
no.
that's where we're at.
Destroying your future.
You have officially switched. That's amazing.
Children
I'm not gonna say I haven't considered it.
That's great.
My team lead at work has asked me about it because he likes Zelda.
Then you should take your Switch to work and show him Zelda, and then you'll never see him again. So, Ryan, you have a big blank space. Are you just not playing anything next, or what's on your agenda?
For a hot second, I thought I saw Duke Nukem.
Yeah,
Forever
I
there.
hypothesized Duke Nukem Forever.
Yeah, I saw it, and then I saw
All right. Memo to self: never leave itinerary list blank. You never know what might fill them.
So Ryan's
Will
gonna
have a
come back
field day
next
with
time
it.
and tell us all about Duke Nukem Forever in excruciating detail. That's your
Oh
assignment.
God, no!
Any
I will not be
Any
hosting.
detail about Duke Nukem Forever, I'm sure, would be excruciating.
Flex, you're hosting the next ATACS episode 11. I'll be dead.
So yeah, I'm just planning on continuing what I've been playing and possibly
Okay.
something else up, depending on how far I get.
Heroes of Dire.
Yeah, man.
So some more Final Fantasy 2 and Horizon for you on the upcoming docket.
Yeah. Home stretch of FF2 and River City Ransom, and probably put a big chunk of time into Horizon.
Well, just so you know, you're actually never on the home stretch of Final Fantasy 2. It just ends, and you're very sad. So good luck with that. But anyway, this has been ATACS episode number 10. One to put into the history books because we're now in double digits. I am Paul, your host from Atlanta, Georgia, and joining me today were Mr. Flex from Raleigh, North Carolina, Mr. Will from Greenville, North Carolina, Ryan from Brooklyn, New York, and Nate from Wendell, North Carolina. Brooklyn, New York.
Thumbs up.
We will be back in about 2 weeks to talk about Zelda again, and we hope that you will rejoin us then. Hopefully we'll have something else.
Hopefully it's over.
Hopefully
it's over. I can't take any more.
Yeah.
Zelda's never over, Ryan.
So in 1 week, me and Nate and Flex will be back to talk about Zelda, so we don't have to do it in 2 weeks. And hopefully we will see you then, and thanks for listening.